Hello everyone, we're picking up from Isaiah 2:6 in this video. This is the reality of the state of Israel at the time of Isaiah. It's gonna go till chapter 4, verse 1. Okay, let's dive in. This section is divided into two parts. Chapter 2, like 2:6 till the end of the chapter 2, is really about the some general aspects, in general terms, what it's like. Chapter 3:1 till the end of the chapter is more about specific terms, like specifically what's going wrong with this country. Okay, just keep that in mind as we dive in. Chapter 2, verse 6. For you have rejected your people, the house of Jacob, because they are full of things from the east, and the fortune tellers like the Philistines, and they strike hands with the children of foreigners. Pause. What's happening here? God is now bringing the problem with this country, and he's saying they're full of the things from the east. East maybe probably refers to Babylon, so like maybe like idolatry or some ungodly influence from Babylon, and fortune tellers, of course, which were ungodly, like the Philistines. And they strike hands with the children of foreigners. What does that mean? Strike hands. Strike hands is literally, think of it as like giving high fives. They're giving high fives with Philistines and Babylonians. What does that mean? They're forming union. They're becoming one. They're going together. They are being assimilated. Okay? Maybe there was political alliances also involved, but more importantly, spiritually, Israel is getting defiled just like the nations around them, contrary to their calling. Verse 7. Their land is filled with silver and gold. There is no end to their treasures. Their land is filled with horses, and there is no end to their chariots. Their land is filled with idols. They bow down to the work of their hands, to what their own fingers have made. So God is condemning three things: wealth, power, and depravity. But we need to ask ourselves, what's wrong with the land being filled with silver and gold, and that there's no end to their treasure? And same thing with horses. Well, this is supposed to make us remember the passage in Deuteronomy 17 where the kings are forbidden to accumulate too much military power, horses, and wealth. So the desire for world security led to assimilation of this world's gods. Their land is filled with idols. Okay. Verse 9. So man is humbled, and each one is brought low. Do not forgive them. Enter into the rock and hide in the dust from before the terror of the Lord and from the splendor of his majesty. The haughty looks of man shall be brought low, and the lofty pride of man shall be humbled, and the Lord alone will be exalted in that day. So again, in that day. The day of the Lord is a prominent theme here, okay? In really all the prophets. The prophet says that the day of the Lord will be a time of destruction and terror. And the important thing is that it's only after this destruction and terror will the ideal state of Israel that we read about earlier in chapter 2 will be reached. So again, God is condemning silver, gold, horse idols, and so on. But God's point at the end of the judgment is that the Lord alone will be exalted in that day. Verse 11. Okay, moving on. For the Lord of hosts has a day against all that is proud and lofty, against all that is lifted up, and it shall be brought low, against all the cedars of Lebanon, lofty and lifted up, against all the oaks of Bashan, against all the lofty mountains, and against all the uplifted hills, against every high tower, and against every fortified wall, against all the ships of Tarshish, and against all the beautiful craft. So God is talking about again, he has a day against these proud people, and then he gives some examples against the cedars of Lebanon, oaks of Bashan, and lofty mountains, and the ships of Tarshish, and so on. So there are really two ways of understanding this. One is that these refer to something like the lofty mountains and everything like that, something great and impressive that people rely on and desire, like majestic cedars of Lebanon, beautiful things, and ships of Tarshish. The ships of Tarshish is really, Tarshish is a city that is not for 100% that we have identified, but generally scholars would say it's a city. I think it's in modern day called Tarsos or something like that. It's in southern Spain. It's in southern Spain. And back then, it really symbolized this big ships. It's a long range vessel. It goes long range. It's big scale trade ship because it's so far. It's got to be big enough to make enough profit out of it. So think of it as like a mega container that goes across some major oceans today. So it's full of wealth. It's full of lucrative business. So people are trusting in this trading that they had, that God is going to destroy because people are getting prideful based on that. But so one way of understanding these oaks of Bashan and cedars of Lebanon is as some things that people trusted. Another way to interpret these things is really talking to be understanding these to be talking about political entities, like cedars of Lebanon is referring to Tyre and Sidon, and so on. So if you take that interpretation route, then you'll be understanding this to be really referring to the scope of the judgment. The scope of the judgment is the whole mankind, not just Israel. I personally tend to favor the latter interpretation, but it really doesn't matter. Either way, the point gets across, and you can, but I will say my position is more of a minority position. Most commentators would say these things, cedars of Lebanon, oaks of Bashan, refer to things that people trust in and that cause them to be prideful. Either way, that's fine. Moving on, verse 17. And the haughtiness of man shall be humbled, and the lofty pride of man shall be brought low, and the Lord alone will be exalted in that day. And the idols shall utterly pass away, and the people shall enter the caves of the rocks and the holes of the ground, from before the terror of the Lord and from the splendor of his majesty, when he rises to terrify the earth. So we see this judgment of God coming, and it's going to be a combination of terror and majesty. Interesting. Verse 20. In that day, mankind will cast away their idols of silver and their idols of gold, which they made for themselves to worship, to the moles and to the bats, to enter the caverns of the rocks and the clefts of the cliffs, from before the terror of the Lord and from the splendor of his majesty, when he rises to terrify the earth. Stop regarding man, in whose nostrils is breath, for of what account is he? End of chapter. So God is saying, in that day, all the things, the idols, the things that they trusted in are gonna come to an end, because God's gonna come in terror and majesty. But notice the last verse. Stop regarding man, in whose nostrils is breath, for of what account is he? This is the punchline. Okay? This verse shows us that the passage that we read has not been talking chiefly about idolatry. It does talk about idolatry, of course, but it is the exaltation of man that results in idolatry. The tendency of human beings to make ourselves the center of all things and to explain in terms of ourselves is a problem. So we see that humanism, where we put humans in the center of the world and understanding the whole world, is that's humanism, right? We're understanding and trying to explain things by putting humans in the middle of the universe. That is what's being warned against. So it's a very relevant passage today. By the way, the statue, David, I heard, is supposed to mark, like the reason why that statue is so famous is because it kind of marked the beginning of Renaissance, where this human reason, the human power, the power of the mind and the reason kind of came to the forefront in importance, not religious faith and belief and so on. And how that statue has this huge hand. That David, the statue, if you look at the hand, is disproportionately big. And it's because, human hand symbolizes the human power because we do all things with hands. So that I think that has an influence all the way today where everything is done with human power. If you work hard, you can succeed. If you do this well, you can succeed. But really, a lot of the times in this world, we know that there are so many things beyond human control. You can study hard, you can be a successful student, does not mean your life will be prosperous. You can work hard in many different things as an athlete, as an artist, but there are so many things that is beyond your control, beyond human control, that is going to cause you to feel this limitation of human ability. So that is the truth that is behind this verse. Stop regarding men in whose nostrils is breath, for of what account is he? God is condemning Judah and Israel for trusting in horses, gold, idols, and all these ships of Tarshish and so on. But God says, in that day, the Lord alone will be exalted. That's the way it should be, and that reflects once again the ideal state that we have read about in the first part of chapter 2. For out of Zion shall go forth the law, and people will come and worship him, and peace will come through it. This is the meaning of chapter 2 of Isaiah.